The Shadow Empress, Rome's forgotten ruler. In the flickering torchlight of ancient Rome, where marble columns cast long shadows across the forum, history remembers those who wore the purple. Their names echo through time. Augustus, Trajan, Marcus Aurelius, men whose legacies were carved in stone and immortalized by devoted chroniclers. But in the dim corridors of power, another figure moved silently, her footsteps barely leaving an impression on the historical record, though her hands may have grasped the very reins of empire. The woman behind the coins. The year is 275 CE. The Roman Empire, vast and sprawling, has only recently been pulled back from the brink of dissolution. In a dimly lit chamber of the imperial palace, a woman sits alone, her fingers tracing the contours of a freshly minted coin. Her own profile stares back at her, stern, dignified, crowned with the diadem of imperial power. Domina Ulpia Severina Augusta, the inscription reads, Mother of the Camp, the Senate, and the Fatherland. Outside these walls, Rome mourns. Emperor Aurelian, her husband, the empire's great restorer, lies dead, his blood spilled by assassins on a dusty road near Byzantium. Now, in the vacuum of power that follows, all eyes turn to the palace. To her. No woman has ever ruled Rome alone. Yet as dawn breaks across the 7 hills, messengers depart for the empire's far-flung provinces, carrying her orders. In the imperial mints, workers continue striking coins bearing her likeness. The machinery of state grinds on, and at its center sits Ulpia Severina, a woman history would try desperately to forget. A dynasty's shadow. Who was this empress who dared to step from the shadows of consort to the blinding light of power? The blood of emperors flowed in her veins. The name Ulpia connects her to the revered Emperor Trajan, who had expanded Rome's borders to their greatest extent a century and a half earlier. By whatever path destiny led her, she emerged in history as the wife of Aurelian, a general of humble birth who rose to become Rome's savior in its darkest hour. While he rode forth to battle, reconquering rebellious provinces and securing crumbling frontiers, she remained in Rome, not idle, but watchful, learning, governing. The empire had been fractured, torn apart by usurpers and external threats. As Aurelian campaigned to restore its unity, someone had to manage the vast bureaucracy, oversee the Senate, maintain the grain supply that fed Rome's hungry masses. That someone, the evidence suggests, was Severina. The unspoken power picture, the imperial court during those tumultuous years. Senators in their white togas bow before entering her presence chamber. Generals, hardened by years of frontier warfare, await her approval for military expenditures. Provincial governors send regular dispatches addressed not to the absent emperor, but to her. The Augusta has decreed, court officials would announce, and Rome would obey. Was this arrangement spoken of openly? The silence of historical texts suggests not. Roman society, steeped in traditions of male authority, would have found such an admission difficult. Better to maintain the fiction that the emperor ruled from afar than acknowledge the reality before their eyes. Yet the coins tell a different story. Unlike other empresses whose images appeared on currency merely as imperial consorts, Severina's coins bore titles of authority: Augusta, Mater Patriae, Mater Senatus. These were not mere courtesies extended to an emperor's wife. They were declarations of power, the fateful message. Now imagine that fateful day when the messenger arrived, bearing news that would shake the empire to its foundations. Emperor Aurelian was dead, betrayed by his own men, stabbed by Praetorian guards, deceived by a treacherous secretary. The palace would have erupted into frantic activity In the midst of this storm, Severina must have made a fateful decision: to step forward and take control. What thoughts raced through her mind in that moment? Did she fear for her life, knowing how dangerous the transition of power could be? Did she consider fleeing with whatever treasures she could carry? Or had she been preparing for this possibility throughout her years at Aurelian's side? Whatever her private fears, her public actions speak of remarkable courage. With no precedent to guide her, Ulpia Severina appears to have done the unthinkable. She continued to rule, the silenced reign. For weeks, perhaps months, the Roman Empire existed in a state of suspended animation. No new emperor was proclaimed. The Senate delayed in naming a successor. And in this extraordinary interregnum, coins continued to flow from imperial mints bearing Severina's image and titles. Imagine the dawn rituals in Rome during these unprecedented days. The Vestal Virgins tending their eternal flame, priests making sacrifices at the temples, city officials going about their duties, all done in whose name? The evidence points to one answer: in the name of Empress Ulpia Severina. In the map rooms of the imperial palace, reports would continue to arrive from distant provinces. Germanic tribes testing the Rhine frontier, Persian forces gathering on the eastern borders, each crisis demanding immediate attention, each decision potentially affecting millions of lives across 3 continents. And at the center of this vast web of power sat a woman whose very rule defied everything Romans believed about natural order and divine will: the reluctant Senate. The Senate chambers during this period must have witnessed heated debates. Elderly senators, repositories of centuries of tradition, argued over precedent and propriety. Military factions pushed their preferred candidates. Meanwhile, the empire held its breath. It is unprecedented, they would have protested. Rome cannot be ruled by a woman. Yet with each passing day that Rome continued to function, with the grain ships still arriving at Ostia, with the legions still holding their positions on far-flung frontiers, the unspoken reality became harder to deny. Rome was, in fact, being ruled by a woman. History reveals only the outcome. After an unusually long delay, the Senate finally selected an elderly senator named Tacitus as the new emperor. The reign of Ulpia Severina, unacknowledged, unprecedented, and possibly the most remarkable political event of the 3rd century, came to an end. The erased empress. What became of Severina after Tacitus took the purple? Here, the historical record falls completely silent. Did she retire gracefully to some villa on the Bay of Naples, watching from afar as a succession of short-lived emperors attempted to fill Aurelian's sandals? Or was she executed, her very existence a threat to male authority? We can only speculate, but one final tantalizing clue suggests she maintained some measure of respect, even reverence. Among the scattered coins that survived from this period, a few rare specimens bear an extraordinary inscription: Diva Severina, the divine Severina. Deification was the highest honor Rome could bestow, reserved for the most revered emperors and their closest family members. That such an honor was granted to Severina speaks volumes about her standing, even if the written histories chose to forget her. The whisper. Through time. As centuries passed and Rome itself eventually fell, Ulpia Severina's memory faded almost completely. Monks copying ancient texts in medieval scriptoria preserved the deeds of male emperors while ignoring her existence. Renaissance scholars, reconstructing Roman history, overlooked the numismatic evidence of her rule. Today, in climate-controlled museum cases around the world, small silver and bronze discs bear silent testimony to what written history tried to erase. Her profile, strong-featured, determined, crowned with the symbols of imperial power, stares out across nearly 2 millennia, challenging us to remember. In the shadow between myth and history, in the silence between written records, we can almost hear her voice, the woman who ruled Rome when all its traditions said such a thing was impossible. The empress whose reign was stamped in metal but erased from memory. Ulpia Severina, who for one extraordinary moment held the world in her hands. Her story reminds us that history's silences often speak as loudly as its declarations. For every name preserved in ancient texts, countless others have been deliberately forgotten. And sometimes, the most remarkable deeds are those that power has chosen not to remember.